Good morning and welcome to the Nebu Wapi Effectiveness webinar. Today we're going to be looking at how using Nebu's software, Wapi software, you can provide a very effective campaign for your online research. The topics we're going to cover today are looking at sort of really sort of how you actually script your survey, how you prepare the information ready, the types of questions you might ask and considerations you have here. We're going to be looking at the design elements on there, the look and feel of it, bearing in mind the different types of survey you could be having there, the different devices people are using and how they interact. Your sample, who you're actually going to send this to, who you're going to invite, and how you look after that sample, how you release it. And then we'll be looking at finally your different delivery methods, how you actually get that sample invited, different ways of pulling in sample from different sources, making sure that your webinar, your Wapi is put out into the widest possible scope, pulling in the amount of people. So first of all, we're going to have a look at some of the scripting areas here, the actual sort of survey you're going to put out to your respondents. So the different elements we're going to look at within there is some of the metadata. So this is the data that's collected when your device is connecting to the server and how you can use that. We'll be looking at the sort of engagement techniques that can be put in there, the type of questions you can ask and how you can really get a respondent to think positively about your survey, to remain in the survey and complete it, which ideally is what we're looking for. We'll also be looking at how you can test this, providing your client with access to a test survey, the feedback mechanisms and how we go through that. And then finally, we'll be looking at some of the sort of language use on there as well. If you're doing multilingual studies, how you can customize that and get that set up for you. So looking at the metadata, the way that Nebu works and operates on here is that whenever a device connects to the server, we collect a lot of information about that device, different things about the sort of playback mechanisms. We collect information about the actual device itself, the browser used, the operating system, the types of media it can handle, so whether it can play Flash or Silverlight, those sort of things. And all of this information is sort of pulled in on each contact. So even though you may be partway through a survey and have switched devices, the minute you start that survey again, your metadata is recaptured and reheld in the sample information. This then means that you can do sort of certain things like, so you can style the questionnaire based on any of that metadata. So it might be sort of the IP address, so you're looking at a language, or it might be the device they're actually using themselves, so you're changing the CSS style sheet on there. It may be sort of, doing different look and feel on there based on the screen resolution or the connection speed. So there's different elements you can put within your scripting based on this metadata that's being captured to enhance the experience of your respondent. We can also then look at skipping certain questions based on, for example, the playback capabilities. If we know that it doesn't support Flash and we have a question that way, we can do that. If we know that certain HTML5 elements aren't supported by the device, you can then do sort of skips based on the questionnaire, or perhaps present the question in a different format. Obviously, you can do different skips as well based on the sort of the IP address, or maybe looking at how you can sort of route through the questionnaire based on different devices as well. Maybe you don't want to show the video playback if they're on a very small screen size. Obviously, capturing all the details about the device then gives you information for reporting. You can then certainly see whether more respondents are engaged in your mobile offering, whether certain browsers are used more often than others. You can get all that information that you can then use to sort of report back, and maybe in future surveys define what happened, investigate why perhaps you had more dropout on people watching it on a sort of mobile device on their cellular phone, and you want to then investigate why that's happening, go through and make changes to perhaps the styling, perhaps the offering that's given out there. There's many sort of factors that can come into play, but having that captured information available to you means you can always review how successful your campaign has been and make adjustments. And then finally, you have the sort of control area on there as well. Obviously, with all the information that's coming in on the metadata, before you even start the survey, you can also look at who's able to access it, perhaps route them directly to a screen out questionnaire because they're coming in on a device you don't want to interview. It might be a sort of a mobile only one, and you don't want people on a PC answering this because it's all about sort of their geolocation. Perhaps you're wanting to look at a certain event. You want them to sort of look at how they use their mobile phone. So again, you can sort of control who's accessing your survey, who's going through there, and really becoming very effective in your delivery of your survey to the right audience with the right content, the right styling and look and feel on there. If we look at then sort of, obviously when you're actually through the survey, there's different engagement elements in there. Some people call this sort of gamification, those types of things. But what it really is looking at, and we've got some examples on the screen now, it is really how you engage your client in the most effective way. What you do to try and make them come into the actual sort of survey, how you maintain their interest, but always bearing in mind that the different questionnaires you may have on here as well, the different elements that you're showing on the screen may also mean that the engagement, the response rates, the way people interact can be influenced there. So there's a lot to consider when you decide to sort of put engagement elements in there as well, how it's going to be used, how it's going to look on the device. So you have to bear in mind when scripting the survey there, what exactly it is that you're going to sort of do on the device itself, and how you're going to run through that. So what we're going to sort of look at just briefly now is sort of how you put these elements, these engagement elements, easily into your design. So if we look at our sort of questionnaire design maker on here as well, and I'll just open up a designing of a script. What you can look at is, again, as you're going through on the different questionnaire areas, we have this display tab. If it's a standard element on here, it's just going to take the sort of script as is. So we're just taking the script as it is here, so you can see, within the script itself, the display tab, and then we can actually drop that down and change it to dynamic HTML. The dynamic HTML is sort of device agnostic, works across all different browsers on there as well. And depending on the type of question you have, so for single response ones, you can then sort of choose the element here. And you'll see that we have all the different sort of plugin settings, advanced settings, depending on which one you change. You can have different configurations to pull in different elements on there as well. So you're always looking at the sort of customizing, but through either applying a sort of CSS style or having it already applied to you, what's in the particular question. We look at the sort of displays on again on a numeric type question, then you have different areas coming in here. So we can pull in our ranking question as well. You can obviously put a sort of like different spinner questionnaires on there as well, or if we want a slider on that, then we have different configuration where you can look at how you customize that slider, that look and feel, or through just filling in boxes, choosing drop downs on there. So you don't need to know how to write this particular script to get some of the elements that are being shown to you, what you're going through. So you can really get a sort of an engagement going on with your particular customers. Now, the useful thing about having something like that means that as you're going through and you're really looking at sort of opening up the system, you're wanting to share certain elements on there as well, then what you can do is obviously look at having the survey adaptive for you, making sure that all of your customers are engaged in that survey, can see exactly what's going on. Now, what we're going to sort of briefly switch over to now is looking at the actual testing of the questionnaire as well. So I'll just close down my element here. Don't worry about having to sort of collect it up. Obviously, if you were doing this sort of for a real survey, you'd be looking at doing the checks on the output there, making sure your skip logic was working, different elements like that. Now, when we're sort of looking at the testing, obviously we can sort of run from our survey itself. You can run how this is working. You can actually sort of look at running a test survey. So you have this test survey link on different areas there. With that test survey, we have a sort of an interactional area on there as well. So if I start a test interview, and whilst that's loading, if you quickly look at the top here, as it's loading, it's going to start detecting exactly what I'm getting on my URL, how that's coming in, what information is available there. So it starts showing me that I'm sort of my test interview on here as well. If I scroll along, it's got my respondent on there, where we can see we've got the device detection on here as well. We've got the different plugins that can be used, so we can see exactly what is available, what playback mechanisms on there as well. And there's a whole string of information there, as we were talking about earlier on the metadata. But whilst we're testing and we're running through our survey, we want to make changes. So here we've got some of the interactive elements on there as well. You can see that you can now make comments on here as well. So if I open up my comments box, I can see on this question all the comments that have been made previously. Now, as sort of my client, I might want to actually then add in a new comment. So if I put in a new comment, I can make that description, the problem on here as well. You know, I might want to, as we've put here, sort of remove unknown on the bottom there, but I might want to say, you know, skip this if already in sample. So, you know, make sure that's on there as well. And there's my comment added in. So I've got the sort of the comment there. I've got the time and date of when this was actually made. And we can see on here as well that if I was sort of looking through this survey, wanting to see the feedback, wanting to see what information my client has put in there and the changes they've requested, I can instantly look at feedback on here and actually add feedback into this particular comment. I can also look at all of the comments that have been made throughout this survey, so I can see where they've come in from, what different questions have been asked. Perhaps one of the comments is based on sort of a previous questionnaire, a previous sort of question in the survey, and it's all the skip logic that you want to make a comment about. You can see whether someone's already picked that up, already sort of specified certain elements aren't in a previous way. So you can really have a sort of on real-time engaged interaction with your client, giving feedback and comments on exactly the design of the survey. So within that setup, obviously it means that it's a much quicker, much more effective way of communicating between yourself and the client, testing a survey, getting the feedback, and means it's shorter time into field, particularly on this. And again, you can test it on different devices. Because the testing code is here as well, you can also then look at the metadata to see which device they were testing on, which can give you an extra insight into perhaps some of the comments that have been made. So going just back now again to our sort of survey, looking at how we were presenting on there as well. So again, we were looking at the sort of elements on there. We can now look at the sort of email itself. We're setting up the sort of the language elements, how we're going to send out that description on the language as well. So when you're sort of adding language into your survey, you have on here the ability to obviously sort of put an image that's going to be shown on there. So we have this sort of SP flag that's there's a JPEG on this particular example. You can have a custom browser tag. So when you open up your browser and you're looking at the description at the top of the tab, that can be customized depending on the language of the respondent on there as well. And obviously you can do different custom error messages. Now, Nebu supplies you with up to 34 languages currently translated in the system for different error messages. And those are sort of global messages, you know, if you've have to choose a certain amount on a multi-response or no more than 3, but more than 1. Those types of messages are already built in and translated into several different languages. However, you can customize these on a global level or on an individual level. So on a per project level, you maybe want to have different messages come up. And that can then sort of obviously reflect the type of study you're doing. Perhaps if it's a sort of aimed at a youth market, you may be wanting to have messages that are a bit more friendly in there rather than a very sort of professional looking message popped up that maybe is more appropriate to the type of study you're doing with a higher level engaged audience. So again, it's all customizing it. It's all making sure that whenever you're designing your script and your survey, you're bearing in mind who that survey is for, how they're going to interact with you, and you're making the best customization within the system to really make sure that you're addressing that type of person. Now, once we've got the sort of all the elements set up there, we're going to move on and actually look at this styling. So we've got our script in place. We're ready to sort of ask people the questions on there, and the questions have been designed nicely. But as you saw when I showed the testing, you could see the elements there. It was a sort of a James Bond look and feel, different style sheet on the background. So what we're going to look at is the sort of designing the styling of the actual survey itself. And obviously, in part of that as well will be the email. So we're looking at a template library, the library built into your sort of startup. So when you're starting to program a survey, how you can access that library, what you can show on there. We'll be looking at the CSS editor. This is a new feature into our latest release on there, so that you can actually very quickly customize a responsive template. And the email editor, so how you can actually edit your invites that are going to be emailed out to any particular person. So looking at design template library, this sort of element pops up when you first start a survey. You're starting up a survey. As soon as you click that it's going to be a web survey, you're presented with a few options here. So you can pull in the template, copy it directly to a project from your library, and you have a preview of all those library elements in there as well. You can create a new template if you need to, or you can do it as sort of a non-template, just a very basic blank screen, putting that out. The sort of use of navigation buttons, whether you want to put those in or out there, we generally say to people, if it's going to be a multi-device survey on there as well, then having the buttons within the actual responsive template on there, not having different frames, will actually work better. And then you've got the options for sort of progress bars on there, have it automatically done, calculating the progress automatically. But within the survey scripting as well, you can actually say how much percentage you want that progress to be as it works through the questionnaire. So you perhaps on a sort of an auto calculation, when you have grid questions, or maybe you have a sort of a video playback question which takes a longer time, you might want to sort of adjust that auto calculation to reflect how the progress in the survey is, the perceived progress in the survey, rather than how many questions you've answered and what your sort of progress is based on that. So from the template area here as well, you can then sort of look at altering different systems, looking at how you can play around with that. Now, what we're going to sort of quickly switch over to as well, and is have a look at the new template CSS editor we have on here as well. So if I just open up a particular project we have, so we'll sort of reopen this one up. So I'll reopen up a project here. And if I look at the settings, and my project settings on here is now on our Wapi tab, I'm looking at sort of the main screen here. So this is the template we've chosen as we were setting up our particular project. Obviously, I can sort of choose different ones on here, but we now have this new button here, a CSS editor. So if I click on this, so I can actually then start sort of launching my CSS editor. It takes the standard response template I have at the moment. So we've got sort of all my different look and feel here as well. You'll notice that as I sort of move the element around, so I can sort of change it, it will respond and change the size of the sort of display, so we can see how the responsiveness is on there. We can obviously change sort of different views, so I can see how different questions are going to look. And based on sort of the survey we're pulling in, and you can see sort of a different grid on there as well. Now, obviously, being able to sort of change some of the elements here, we've got different items on the background, so I can then change sort of between perhaps different background images I've already loaded, or I can have sort of no background on there as well. I might want to sort of change different colors on the background, so have that one instead. So no image itself, and then just the color, and you can see automatically it's updating what's on the screen. It's changing the elements on there. So it means that, you know, any of the sort of different elements you might have, and you might want to sort of reposition and easily sort of click them around, you can then adjust your sort of library that you've pulled in. You can then make additional adjustments on it to actually look how it's going to be displayed to the respondent themselves, and you can quickly then alter any sort of template you have, and have that set out for your different individuals, the different sort of surveys you're going to do. So it makes it very quickly to edit this instead of having to know any CSS language or HTML language programming it up. And there are sort of many sort of responsive templates that are available on the Dub community area for people to download and use within our system. Now, the elements, as I said, this is part of the sort of new area on here, and so you can change those. Obviously, you don't have to use a template here. You can use the style sheet. You can sort of customize some of the areas and the elements just by selecting perhaps the background color from here instead, and making changes to your survey in that way through the sort of the standard buttons and controls that we always have within the system on there. But the CSS editor is obviously a lot easier and quicker, more visual way of getting a very sort of engaged, a very stylized format on there, and it is a responsive template, so will auto adjust depending on the device that you're using. So moving on to have a look again at the sort of email editor on there as well. So within the survey design, you have the ability to obviously dump in HTML code, copy paste it or write HTML in there in your sort of email editor. There's a WYSIWYG editor there as well, so you can sort of see what's happening, work with that WYSIWYG editor, make the changes in there and see them instantly on the screen. And you can also then click onto the example tab, and it will pull one of the sample records in, so populate some of the areas within the template. You can see what it's going to look like to an actual respondent themselves. So it gives you that sort of ability to customize your email, look at how that's actually going to be sort of sent out, and how your respondent is going to see how that sort of pulls them into the survey and starts them off. So we've got our script ready. We've got the look and feel, the style ready as well. Now we're going to look at the sample who we're going to send this to. So if we're looking at sort of different cleaning methods on there, so we've got to check the format. We've got to make sure that it is going out to an email. We can create passwords as part of this process. We can sort of deduplicate, remove doubles in the system on there as well, and we can set up additional blocking conditions. So looking at sort of when we're actually sort of importing the sample records on there as well. If it's imported into the email field, then we're going to check that email format on there, checking for things like the @ sign to have a dot after the @ sign as well. It's not going to check the DNS at this point. That's only going to be checked when you're going to start looking out and sending the email information out there. So it's just checking that there is a field in there that is in an email format, doesn't contain inconsistent characters. It follows the sort of the rules of how an email should be. We are sort of creation of passwords. Now, this can be done automatically on the import of the sample. And you might want to do this in case, you want to have a unique link per respondent. They're not on a sample. Perhaps they're not sort of on a panel and doesn't have a panel ID or different bits and pieces like that. But you might want to just sort of create a unique link. So we can generate either a random number and you set the minimum max number on there as well. You can generate random characters and obviously looking at these sort of character sets, whether it's includes capitals, whether it's sort of lowercase in there, mixed cases, which characters are randomly generated in there. Or you can do this from a word list, and you can actually customize the word list that's going to be used in there. So you have sort of, as you see at the bottom of the screen, the word list here, and in the editor, a couple of hands on there on the icon, so you can open that up, add in as many different sort of words as you want. And when you're then sort of loading in this sample, you can load it as an inactive. So you can reserve that sample once it's loaded. It doesn't have to be available instantly for the emailing. So you might want to sort of pass other conditions across it, do some checking once it's loaded in there. Now, after the sort of load, we're looking at the deduplication. So obviously we want to deduplicate any emails that have come in that maybe are doubles, but you have the option of doing a sort of a Boolean condition on there as well. Perhaps you want to remove any emails that it's the same email address, but there's the same name. Perhaps people are sharing emails, you're sending it out, and you want to have it sort of addressed to a different person, but still at the same email address, so you don't remove those as doubles. So there's different ways of looking at how you actually go through the system. And with those doubles that are found, you can either remove them completely so they're not in your sample set, or you can deactivate them, which means you can then review them and reactivate individual numbers if you find that that particular record may not be a double. So once you've got your sort of sample deduped and it's loaded in, it's ready to go, there's certain things you might want to do on controlling that through your blocking reasons. Now, this could be things like looking at a particular domain name that you may be wanting to block. Perhaps you've just been provided a random sample of email addresses, and there possibly is your sort of competitor in there that you don't want to invite to the survey. Well, you can just set a blocking reason to say if it contains this string within the email field, then stop that from being shown out, stop that from being released. But it could be sort of temporarily blocks on there as well. You might want to temporarily hold back any sample that has come in from a particular source. So this is provided for you. And within the supervisory screen, you're then given an overview of your different blocking reasons you've set up and how many records are either blocked or can be blocked. And it's just a matter of sort of checking the box or unchecking it to have that blocked or unblocked in real time. So you can really control how your sample is actually released, sent out, how you invite people into the system there as well. So once we've sort of looked at the sort of blocking of it, and we've set up our sample, we've got the right people in there as well, we're now going to actually invite them. We're going to step through the process of the invitation. And delivery might take different formats. It could be sort of via emails, as we've talked about in the email editor. you're sending out as standard an email out to people to invite them to take part in the survey. It could be a sort of a Facebook in news feed that's going in there. So you're actually pulling people through their news feed and automatically inviting them into a survey that way. Could be through other intercepts on the website. So maybe a pop-up, depending on X amount of visitors, or there's any other methods that may be in there. So when we're looking at emails, as we said beforehand, you can obviously sort of schedule the emails as well. So this is our sort of email scheduler. We're looking at what's on there. Obviously the formatting of the email. So launching your WYSIWYG editor, you can see at the sort of top of the screen here, you've got both the text and HTML that can be pulled in, and pulling in any attachments on there as well. So if you need to have perhaps terms and conditions that are attached to the email, you can pull those in and have that sent out. Obviously you can format the subject matter, you can format the sort of name of the sender and the address it's coming into, where any sort of replies are going back to. We're always worth bearing in mind that when you are sending out on behalf of your client, there's certain technical things you should take care of as well, sort of setting of SPSF records, so that it makes sure that the delivery, your SMTP server you're using is valid for delivering on behalf of that particular sender you're sending it for. So again, reducing the sort of the blacklisting possibilities, grey listing possibilities for blocking your sample from getting there. Obviously, part of the aspects of that sort of sample blocking on there is the schedule, how many you're sending at any particular time. So if you're sending out, a million emails all in one batch, it's highly likely that regardless of having DKIM sort of identified mails on there, domain key identified mails, or any fingerprinting or SPSF records, if you send out that amount of emails in one go, it's likely that an ISP provider will see this as a spam type of mail. So obviously you don't want that situation to happen, so you want to sort of reduce the batches, but you also want to be able to target when you're inviting people. So having a schedule, saying which days you're going to send it on, which time frame you're going to send those invites to, means you can then target the response rates. It's generally sort of held that if people don't click and open that email within the sort of first so many minutes of it being delivered and read, then you're not going to get them. So making sure that it's delivered at the right time. It's not the 100th email that they get to in the morning when they open up their email in their office. Yeah, those types of things get skipped over very quickly. So timing and delivery is very important on how you're going to be effective with your survey fieldwork. And obviously you can have multiple schedules here as well. So when you're looking at the different schedules, we've got the sort of different orders that you can send them to. You might want to randomly send this out based on the sort of the code that's in there as well. But it could be based on sort of alphabetically based on the name. It might be based on the sort of random generated password. So even though you may have been sent a sample file that's very ordered and structured, you can randomize the sample and how that's being sent out in this particular way. And lastly, obviously, we have a filter on here as well. The filter could be based on the status of the record, whether it's sort of partially completed. So this is going to be a reminder schedule, or it could be, we've already got a certain amount of type of people in there, so we're not going to do them. Perhaps they've already received 2 reminders, so you can do that based on the count on there as well. And eliminating extra things. Well, if it's already been sent once and it bounced, then don't send that back again. So there's a lot of filtering capabilities, different scheduling capabilities to ensure that your email is delivered at the most appropriate time to the people, and you're not sort of over inviting them or sending sort of 3, 4, 5 reminders to a survey that is getting towards the end of field on there as well. Obviously having a duration on it, never stopping on there, so it can completely continue on that format, means that you really want to make sure that you're not going to be sending out a 15th reminder to someone. Probably they ain't going to report you. But these are sort of elements that you have the control over within here. Now, additionally, we've built in a connection now to a Mandrill email system on there as well. So whilst you have a lot of control in the Nebu system of the send out, and we do sort of report back on various bounce back elements on there. You might want to have a different integration. You might use the Mandrill system on there as well. Now, the Mandrill system gives you the ability to have extra functionality for reporting. You can put different tags in there. You can use those tags then to cross-report on the emails that were sent out and delivered. So it might be a tag so that you know your filter's sort of been put in there, and it's the tag is reminder 1. Because of the continuous sending out that Nebu does on the schedules, you may want each sort of different schedule to have different flags so you can then see when those invites were sent on different time periods and do extra reporting on that. But the Mandrill system allows you to do that. It also means you have sort of different ways of targeting campaigns on there as well. So you can have a different tag set up to sort of use as a filter and schedule in those areas as well. Mandrill is a sort of software system out there which is connected through the sort of SMTP server, different setting on your email when you're setting up your project and choosing which server you're going to send from. Then there's the option to use Mandrill. Looking at the Facebook delivery. So what we're looking at here is directly from the Nebu software, means that you can actually publish your survey into a news feed on a Facebook page. Obviously, you need the information from the owner of that Facebook page to be able to sort of say what that page ID is. But most people that have their own Facebook pages are able to do that and provide that for you. So if your client wanted to sort of target specific people, target people that are interested in and follow them through social media, then you can use this to direct traffic into the survey, knowing that it's going to be in the feed, knowing that it's going to be a topic of interest to them. Other intercepts that you might want to put onto different sort of websites, different pop-ups, maybe have a time pop-up, have it as a X amount of people on there that so many visitors come into it, or an animated footer on the website, so you see when you visit certain websites you get sort of an overlay on there as well. Not a pop-up in the traditional sense that when you block the pop-ups it doesn't appear, but those elements that are on the page and invite you to take part in surveys. Now obviously you can get sort of people to customize and write these for you, but within the Nebu sort of community area, our online site for our customers, you can download code which you can then customize yourself. So the community area has that coding available for you. Obviously, other possible delivery methods on there as well is SMS invites. We know that with now this sort of, people are attached to their mobile phone and don't leave home without them. And me personally, I feel like if I don't have my mobile phone with me, then I've lost an arm. You're always checking it. So the SMS invite is another way of getting to people. They can see a link on there as well. They can, decide straight away whether they're going to launch it from their mobile phone and be engaged in there. Obviously, knowing that you've sent it by SMS, that the person is going to be responding on their sort of mobile device. That then that sort of styling, look and feel is going to be presented to them in that fashion. It's going to be taking the CSS elements directly to that. Using QR codes on there as well, you can sort of create different QR codes that will launch the survey for you, and these can be obviously depending on who you're trying to attract, but you might have that on a poster at an event, so someone can just scan the QR code, they get launched up a survey just asking them about that particular event or item that's happened on there as well. So different ways of launching these. And also creating tiny URLs and having those put out through sort of Twitter and other social media areas means that you can then start looking at possibly river sampling that, but it's always bearing in mind that wherever you put these codes, wherever you sort of put up the tiny URLs, the more widespread you put them, the less control you have over who you're trying to target, the less effective that's going to be. So it's choosing the appropriate method of invitation to get people into your survey. Now, that kind of comes to the end of the webinar here about how you can be effective with your Wapi areas there. Obviously, we haven't gone into the reporting. We haven't looked at any of the sort of automation of the processes through this particular area, and haven't gone into too much detail on the email sort of setup about keywords that may be used, phrases to avoid so you don't get identified as spam. But there's a lot of other information So on our website as well, we have information. There's an email white paper you can download, which covers some of the questions that may be raised on sort of exactly how you format and phrase your survey on there as well. There's different demos on our YouTube channel, so you can look at previous webinars or look at sort of different how-to guides on there, which will show you how you interact with the surveys themselves. And obviously at the end of this webinar now, there's sort of certain questions on here as well. So if you see on the side of your sort of viewing one, we can put in a Q&A, and you can obviously sort of open up any questions on the audience as well, and I'll answer those. Yep, one coming here. The white paper email. Yep, the white paper. As I said, it's on the nebu.com website on there as well. We have various different elements on that website, so you can go through, find out, sort of perhaps look at the gamification areas on there as well. But there is a menu item about email delivery and the white paper. Fill in your sort of email address, and then you can download it and disseminate it as well. Different questions there. There are other white papers obviously covering different subjects that may be different field work appropriates on there. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah. If you've seen any of the information on here as well, you want to have an update on there to perhaps to get that integration to the Mandrill set up on your system, or you want the latest version with the CSS editor on there as well, customers can just log into the Dub community area and request an upgrade. We can schedule that in for you at the most appropriate time. The Facebook. Yep, Facebook. With the Facebook, obviously, you need to have an SSL license on there as well. It's a HTTPS connection. So you need to, as a customer, have that sort of SSL license, have your survey put in that way so that you can then connect to their Facebook page and feed in the survey. The survey is just fed in by sort of choosing which survey you want to publish into that news feed. And we can customize those icons for you, make sure it looks slightly different when it's published in there, but you specify what survey it is and how that's presented in the feed. Good question. Yeah, been asked here about the impact that colors, logos has on sort of how people react to a survey, how likely they are to be engaged and take part in that. That could be a whole webinar in itself. There's a lot of different thought out there about how if a plain survey is crisper, more engaging or not, or if certain elements on there make you feel it. There's a lot of sort of psychological questions over, if you have a pair of eyes on there and it feels like you're being watched, will you be more conscious in how you answer? That's a vast amount of questions there as well. Really, there's so much sort of different thought out there. I think in some ways you have to try and investigate that yourself. Use your own experiences, your own knowledge of the people you're trying to contact and what works best for them, so that when you're presenting it. But this is the case with anything. Tools allow you to be as widespread in your creativity as you want, but bearing in mind that the more sort of information that's provided on the screen, the less likely someone's going to be engaged in it. So getting that balance right on, scrolling over a grid question, it might be appropriate for a sort of large screen PC, but having a sort of a 20 row by 30 column grid question, which highlights different buttons and multi responses on it, it's probably not the most effective way when you're looking at surveys on the device. And also bearing in mind, length of interview, something we didn't cover here, but the different elements, different factions that you need to be aware of when you're doing sort of surveys online is that you are sort of competing for time of the respondent. If anyone's doing anything on a mobile device, that you're just flicking in and out of it. You're not dedicating a lot of time to there. So there's also other things to bear in mind, which are sort of outside really of the software itself, but is also about how you design your survey, what elements you want to look in there. Okay, well, thanks everyone for taking part in the webinar today. Obviously, this is sort of shareable through our YouTube channel. There's a another sort of running through of the webinar this afternoon. So if any of your colleagues sort of missed it and you want to invite them to that, they can still just check it out on our webinar channel, on our YouTube channel, and follow that, or subscribe to the webinar as before. So again, we will notify everyone of the next webinar that's coming up, and there'll be another one next month as well. Again, thank you for taking part, and hope you all have a good day.